Hera is the Greek goddess of family, marriage, motherhood and women, daughter of Cronus and Rhea. His younger brother and husband is Zeus, therefore, she is the queen of Olympus. Stick around to see her history, myths and fights where this goddess is involved, so let's get started. Hera was one of the daughters of Cronus and Rhea. The little goddess was one of the victims of her father's devouring fury. Cronus, to prevent one of his children from dethroning him, as he himself had done with his own father, devoured them one by one as they were born. In this way Hera ended up devoured by her own father. However, the cunning of Gaia managed that one of her sons, Zeus, was saved from the devouring fury of Cronos, and when he grew up he defied and defeated his father, forcing him to vomit all his siblings, with Hera among them. Shortly after his return from Tartarus, Hera and her siblings officially declared war on Cronus and the Titans, resulting in the First Olympic War, which lasted 10 long years. The Cyclops forged a powerful golden scepter with a lotus flower for Hera, which she bravely wielded in battle against the Titans. The Titans initially had the advantage, as they were far more experienced warriors, but as the years passed, the gods quickly became expert warriors, and eventually prevailed. While preparing for the final battle, Hera and her siblings climbed Mount Olympus and Zeus used his thunderbolt to cut off the top of Mount Otris and demolish the palace of Cronus. Soon after, the gods invaded the ruins of Mount Otris, and the Cyclopes captured Atlas, Hyperion, Japetus, Cryos and Ceos. The Cyclops forced the Titans to kneel before Zeus, Poseidon and Hades. Zeus took his father's scythe, and cut Cronus into 1,000 pieces. After the battle, the gods chose Mount Olympus as their official residence, and the Cyclops built magnificent palaces for them all. As a result, the gods began to call themselves the Olympians. Soon after, their brothers divided the world among themselves. Hades received the underworld, Poseidon the seas and oceans, and Zeus the heavens, and became king of Mount Olympus and the gods. As for Hera, she became the goddess of marriage, motherhood and family love. As the most beautiful goddess on Olympus, before the birth of Aphrodite, Hera was desired by many gods and titans. However, she had a fierce and infamous temper and rebuked anyone who tried to court her. As a result, her mother decided to send her to her uncles Oceanus and Thetis so that she could learn to master her temper and act maturely. Hera spent several happy years with them, away from Mount Olympus. After seeing the very stable and loving marriage of Oceanus and Thetis, Hera decided to fight with her personality to have one of her own. Shortly after his return, Hera caught the attention of Zeus. Although Hera had strong feelings for him, she refused to let herself be another conquest of his. However, Zeus was very stubborn and did not give up. He used his excellent singing and dancing skills to entertain and woo her, but Hera would not give in. Zeus then made a wager with Hera that, if she ever confessed her love for him, she would become his wife. A few days later, Zeus caused a great storm around Olympus, and cleverly disguised himself as an injured cuckoo. In the form of a cuckoo, he flew into Hera's chamber, just as she was closing her windows, and landed on the marble floor. The goddess, thinking it was a helpless creature, took it in her arms, dried it and gave it some nectar. The next morning, the cuckoo was still in her chamber, and affectionately rubbed its beak against Hera's finger. Hera, who had taken a liking to it, gently snuggled it in her arms. At that instant, the cuckoo transformed into Zeus. Although outraged by his deception, Hera was very impressed by Zeus' intelligence and wit, and finally agreed to become his wife on the condition that, if she married him, Zeus would remain faithful to their marriage. Their wedding took place in a spectacular celebration on Olympus, attended by many gods and allied titans. Zeus and Hera received great gifts from all their guests, but Hera's favorite was a magnificent apple tree with golden apples that she received from her grandmother Gaia. To take care of her tree, Hera employed the Hesperides, nymph daughters of the Titan Atlas, but since Hera didn't trust them much, she hired a fierce dragon with 100 heads, Ladon, as an extra guardian. The couple lived very happily for 300 years and had 4 children: Ares, god of war; Aeneas, goddess of war and twin of Ares; Hebe, goddess of youth, Ilithyia, goddess of childbirth, and Hephaestus, god of fire and blacksmiths. However, in time Zeus began to have his first extramarital affairs. Hera, furious and frustrated with his infidelity, spent most of her time guarding Zeus, as well as making the lives of his lovers and illegitimate children miserable. Hera deeply hated Hercules or Heracles, whom she tried to kill several times. However, after Hercules was deified, Hera made peace with him, and became his mother-in-law as he married her daughter, Hebe. Excision was the first mortal to visit Olympus and was apparently also the first human to realize that other humans could be killed in battle. The gods were so impressed, that Excision taught them to fight other humans with a sword instead of simply throwing rocks at them or growling at them, and subsequently invited him to a banquet on Olympus. Excision began to think that the gods were his friends, which turned out to be a terrible mistake. Throughout the evening, Excision looked at Hera, for she was the most beautiful lady at the table. Zeus was so busy at the feast that he did not notice. Finally, Hera felt so uncomfortable about Excision that she excused herself from the banquet. In turn, Excision mistakenly took it as his cue to follow her and after a few minutes excused himself. Excision tried to kiss her, but Hera pushed him away and ran off to her room. When she was calm, she began to think about her revenge. She could punish Excision herself, but Hera decided to tell Zeus so that he would be jealous at least once and have to defend her honor. When she returned to dinner, she took Zeus aside and told him what had happened. However, Zeus declared that Excision was his guest and that he could not incinerate him without good proof. Hera was angry with Zeus, but he calmed her down by telling her that he had a plan. He created a cloud and gave it the form of Hera, to see what Excision would do. Then she went back to dinner with the fake Hera, and as soon as Zeus left, Excision started flirting with her, and the fake Hera played along. The next morning, the gods were surprised to see that Excision had stayed, and when they asked him why, Excision replied that Hera had invited him to stay and began to say that Hera preferred him over Zeus. Just then, Zeus walked silently into the hall and none of the gods complained about his punishment. Zeus summoned a chariot wheel and tied Excision to the spokes. He then set fire to it and hurled the wheel into the sky like a flying disc. Excision became immortal, but only so that he could suffer eternal agony. This does not end yet, and there are many stories about Hera. Before continuing, I invite you, if you are liking the video, to like and subscribe. Now let's continue. Her last son was Hephaestus, whom she somehow gave birth to by herself. When Hera saw the ugly and unsightly appearance of her son, she threw him out of Olympus to avoid the taunts of the other gods. Hephaestus fell into the sea, where he was found and raised by Thetis. However, her act of cruelty would scar Hephaestus for life and he would seek revenge on his mother. After spending 9 years under the sea with Thetis, Hephaestus finally returned to Olympus on a donkey. As he rode to the throne room, all the gods, especially Hera, were surprised to see him. Hephaestus had brought with him magnificent new thrones for all the gods. Hera's throne was made of adamantium and shone like pure diamond. Impressed, Hera quickly sat down on it, but in doing so she was tightly bound by invisible, unbreakable chains. The chains gripped Hera so tightly that she could not breathe. Ares and Hermes tried to convince their brother to release their mother, but he flatly refused. Finally, Dionysus decided to take matters into his own hands. Dionysus began to visit Hephaestus' forge from time to time and chatted peacefully with him. The two gods quickly became fast friends, and a week later, Dionysus brought him wine, and finally convinced an out-of-his-mind Hephaestus to forgive Hera. After releasing her, Hephaestus and Hera made peace. Hera, enraged by her husband's constant infidelity, decided to start the first, and last, mutiny against Zeus. She managed to gain the support of Poseidon, Apollo, and Athena, and that same evening, the gods hid in the hallway adjacent to Zeus' royal chambers, awaiting Hera's signal. As soon as Zeus had fallen asleep, the four quickly bound him with unbreakable, tight golden chains. Even chained and completely immobilized, Zeus was very intimidating. Poseidon tried to reason with his brother, and demanded that he be a better ruler. But when Zeus refused, Hera decided to leave him chained in her office until he agreed. Soon after, the four set off for the throne room, where they arranged a democratic meeting, which proved to be a very cumbersome task. Zeus' cries were heard by Thetis, and after convincing him that he would be merciful to the gods who put him in chains, Thetis went to find Briars, his Centimon uncle, to help free him. Briars was more than happy to save Zeus, since he owed him his freedom for rescuing him from Tartarus. Briars freed him, after which Zeus took his master ray and burst into the throne room, violently ending the meeting. Zeus remained true to his word, and was merciful towards the four gods, but all were punished. But it was Hera who received the most severe punishment of all. Zeus chained her just above the terrifying void of chaos, and every day, chaos would visit her and threaten to make her fall into the void. Hephaestus could hear his mother's wailing from Olympus, which infuriated him, for he could not bear to hear her suffering from such a severe punishment. As a result, he released her. Hera, with tears in her eyes, embraced him, and vowed never to call him ugly ever again. All the gods and goddesses were invited to the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, later parents of Achilles. But the goddess Eris was not invited because of her troublesome nature. Angry, Eris appeared at the party with the apple of discord, a golden apple with the word Callisti, for the most beautiful, inscribed on it, which she threw among the goddesses, causing Aphrodite, Hera and Athena to claim it for their own, starting a quarrel. Zeus, so as not to have to choose between the goddesses, commissioned Paris to be the judge. Each of the three goddesses tried to bribe him to choose her. Hera offered him political power, Athena promised him military prowess, and Aphrodite tempted him with the most beautiful woman on earth, Helen. Paris being a passionate young man, and although it is not known how long he pondered the question, he ended up conceding the apple to Aphrodite, then abducting Helen and thus provoking the Trojan War. I hope you liked the video. This still does not end with the goddess Hera, and still need to know the battles and conflicts that caused against the external children of Zeus, but this we will leave for another video. Do not forget to subscribe to learn more mythological legends. See you soon.